Hello and welcome to another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the Timberwolves have added another player to the training camp roster, CJ Elleby, former Portland Trailblazer. We'll talk about Elleby, what he could bring to the table, and also what the end of the roster competition could look like for the final spots on the Wolves roster this season. It's all coming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. The Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Hump Day. Hopefully you're having a fantastic week so far. A big thank you for those of you that make Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken. And of course, it's available on all of those audio platforms that you know and love. All right, today I want to talk about CJ Elleby, the Timberwolves' latest addition to the training camp roster. A couple of I guess, Exhibit 10 deals still, or now there's been a couple of reported Exhibit 10 deals. Another player who had reportedly signed one will not be joining the Wolves this year. So a few things there at the end of the roster to talk about going into training camp. This is a busy weekend in terms of random early August weekends can be for the Wolves. Jaden McDaniels and I think was it McDaniels and Wendell Moore were both played at the Pro-Am in Portland with Chet Holmgren and all those guys. Paolo Banchero put up those crazy numbers. Jaden McDaniels had, I think, 52-10 or 52-11. So everybody's talking about that late last week. Or I think it was late last week, Sunday night, Monday, something like that. And then on Tuesday in the Twin Cities Pro-Am, Wendell Moore, Josh Minott played, as well as Nate Knight. So there was a lot going on basketball-wise for some of the Timberwolves younger players on the roster. D'Lo showed up to the Twin Cities Pro-Am that was out there on social media that he was showing up to support Minott and more. So a lot going on. The Timberwolves made a couple of well, I guess one roster move reportedly in signing CJ Elleby. CJ Elleby, we'll get into his game next, and then I want to talk about the fit on the end of the roster. But he reportedly signed an Exhibit 10 contract, which a reminder on what that is. Basically, it's like a preferred walk-on kind of sort of in college basketball, in the sense that they get a bonus, typically somewhere. It's oftentimes $50K. It's somewhere $50K or less. They get a bonus, and then they get another bonus if they stick with the G League team. And they're essentially in competition for a roster spot out of training camp, but almost always those players end up on the team, on a team set G League team, and then they get paid a little bit of a higher salary than most G League guys. So the Wolves have had several Exhibit 10 guys. I think you can have like a max of 5 or 6. And it also gives you kind of an inside track on an actual roster spot, a partially guaranteed NBA contract, a two-way deal, all that stuff. So this year, the Wolves had reportedly already signed David McCormick to an Exhibit 10 deal, the big who played 4 years at Kansas. He was on the Summer League team. And then also Philip Wheeler, the former high school star in New Jersey that played in Puerto Rico, did not go to college in the U.S., but high upside type guy, also was on the Summer League team. Didn't see quite as much run as McCormick did. And now we haven't heard anything about Wheeler recently, but it was reported this weekend that that McCormick would be leaving his 10-way deal with his Exhibit 10 deal with the Timberwolves, and would be going to play overseas in Turkey this year, which I'm sure there's more guaranteed money, and it was probably like, make the decision now or else the offer's not on the table, is my guess. But this was according to this team in Turkey, had a press release saying that McCormick was signing. He was reportedly going to sign an Exhibit 10 with the Wolves, but I'm sure saw the writing on the wall, especially with Nate Knight re-signing and other moves, and Naz Reid as well. I mean, the Wolves have so much depth in the front court at this point that McCormick took what was likely more guaranteed money to go overseas. And then the other Exhibit 10 guy in Philip Wheeler, we haven't heard anything about him in the past month or so, but reportedly he's not actually listed on Spot Racks Timberwolves site, but depending on which site you go to, he is listed, and it was reported by several folks back about a month ago, just prior to Summer League, that that Philip Wheeler would be signing at Exhibit 10. So I think we can probably plan on him being with the team. And then CJ Elleby is the latest addition to the Timberwolves roster for training camp. So at this point, it looks like they have the two Exhibit 10s in Wheeler and Elleby. They're actually not too dissimilar in terms of their player profile, although Elleby has, 88 games of NBA experience under his belt already, despite being only 22 years old. So next, what I want to do is break down Elby's game, what he brings to the table, what we can expect to see out of him. And then I want to get to what the Wolves are doing with the end of the roster and what this could look like once they break camp here in, I don't know, roughly 2 months from now, I guess. So we're going to do all that here next on the show. First, let's talk about our title sponsors of today's show, and that is, of course, our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. Of course, there's plenty of futures out there for the NBA. The Timberwolves win total is still too low, so definitely go over there and smash the over on that. Uh, NFL games, I think the Hall of Fame game is like next week. If it's not later this week, actually, it's really soon. Maybe it's this weekend. So get ready to bet on NFL preseason if that's your thing. And if nothing else, regular season's like a month away. So tons to check out over at BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sport wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores to podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so the Timberwolves have added CJ Elleby on an Exhibit 10 contract. What does CJ Elleby bring to the table? I'll give you the quick profile on Elleby. If the name sounds familiar, it's because he actually played in 58 games last season for the Portland Trail Blazers, starting 28 games. Remember, Portland was not very good. Damian Lillard was out for much of the season, had a rookie head coach in Chauncey Billups, and Elleby ended up starting 28 games as a second-year player, 21-year-old. He just turned 22 this summer. So, and he's a native of the Northwest. He's from Washington and went to Washington State for college, and was a second-round pick, actually, of Portland. And at the time, a lot of folks thought he was going to go undrafted. He was picked like 46 by Portland, and many publications, many draft sites had him like in the 70s, 80s in terms of prospects. Thought he'd be an undrafted, maybe a two-way type guy, but he instead actually was a second pick inside an NBA deal with the Trailblazers. He's 6'6" with a 6'7" wingspan, so good size, not incredible length, but a good size. And because of his build, he looks a little bit lankier than that. He was a high usage scorer in college. He scored a lot of points on a lot of shots at a pretty mediocre at best Washington State team. Had the ball in his hands a ton, and he had the green light, so he scored a lot, but it wasn't super efficient. So again, second round pick by Portland last year. Looking at his college stats, I think that's the thing that jumps out the most. Was just the high usage. He did average 18 points a game in his second season. He only played 2 seasons at Washington State. That's kind of the college career. If you look at his profile coming out of college and what he was expected to do, again, good size for a wing, very good rebounder for his size, and also given that he has modest at best athleticism, good rebounder, a very good handle for his size at 6'6". He can initiate some offense just in terms of his ability to handle the ball. And he's functionally a pretty good passer. The assist numbers don't pop out at you at Washington State, but again, mediocre team, not a ton of great prolific scoring teammates to help those numbers at all. He's also a very good defender. Again, at 6'6", 6'7" wingspan, good anticipation, good at gambling and using his length to get steals and get out in the open floor. He also could draw on the offensive end of the floor. He's good at getting to the free throw line. That was true in college. He had I think his free throw rate was over a 0.3. So, nearly a third of his field goal attempts ended with a free throw attempt. He does make open jumpers really well. That was one of his things at Washington State. Again, the 3-point shooting numbers don't stand out. His shooting percentage, let's see, 3-pointers at Washington State as a freshman, 41%, as a sophomore, just a hair under 44%. And then in the NBA so far, the 3-point shooting percentage is not good either. Total over 2 seasons, 27.5%. And the mechanics are really weird. It's like kind of a slingshot type jumper, kind of angles his body a little bit. But he's got really good range for whatever that's worth. Good catch and shoot range. He displayed that quite a bit in college. I think there was some hope for him coming out of college that he would be a 3-and-D type guy if he could, the jumper could have some consistency. We're not quite there in terms of consistency on the jumper, as the 3-point percentage at Portland I just cited. The shot selection is not good either. But in terms of strength, it's size, it's rebounding, it's his handle for his size. He's a pretty good defender, good team defender, uses his length well, can get to the free throw line, and he can knock down open jumpers with range and catch and shoot situations more so than off the dribble. The negatives are mostly just a function of him being extremely raw still as a player. He just turned 22, played 2 years in college. Bad shot selection coming out of college. I can't speak to that as much at Portland, but shot selection was certainly an issue in college. He doesn't finish through contact well. Again, modest athleticism at best, and he's a little bit slight still. His build is not. He doesn't have the build to fight through contact very well in the paint. I mentioned his weird shot mechanics. Certainly, it doesn't matter as much if it goes in, right? See Kevin Martin as in terms of a former Timberwolf, but any number of guys that don't have perfect shot mechanics. There's plenty of them. Um, but like if it goes in, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't really go in for CJ Elleby. Like again, college shooting percentage. You look at just straight field goal percentage, it still wasn't all that great. It was let's see, under 40% in his second year. So 39.6% from the field. And it was something like it was like 33% on twos in Pac-12 play or something crazily low. Under 34% from three in college. As a pro, he was under 40% from the field his first 2 seasons and under 30% from three. So last season, 39.3% from the field, 29.4 from the field. And that means he was 46% on 2-point field goals. So for his NBA career across 88 games, which is, more than one full season, 39% from the field, 27.5% from three for Elleby. So the shooting mechanics maybe do matter if the shot's not going in. It's also really tough to completely retool a jumper on the fly at the NBA level. So, I don't know what that necessarily means here. If that there is some hope that it'll change. I think the appeal with Elleby is certainly his size and length and the defense, which is already pretty good. I think at the NBA level, like the metrics don't love it. Portland wasn't a good defensive team last year, or even really the year before, for that matter. I think there's still something there in terms of potential because of the size and the length and the anticipation on defense, and the fact that he does have some scoring touch, whether that be from the perimeter. He's an okay free throw shooter. He's like 72% for his career when he does get to the line. You'd like there to be some more athleticism and maybe a bit better feel in terms of shot selection. He still shoots a few too many mid-range jumpers. Doesn't, even though he gets the free throw line, it doesn't seem like he's very comfortable getting into the paint, in among the trees, taking contact, absorbing contact at the NBA level. So if there's a little bit more athleticism or a little more scoring touch, you'd feel really good about his prospects as a 3-and-D type guy. Instead, there's a reason, like AJ Lawson, for instance, we did last Monday's show on him, and I talked to Sean Woodley of Locked On Raptors. So I think AJ Lawson has a similar profile in terms of what he can be as a player, or in his case, really what he is, and also his physical profile. AJ Lawson's a much more attractive player to me than CJ Elleby, even though Elleby's got far more NBA experience. And I'd say, Philip Wheeler at least has the athleticism going for him. The other reported Exhibit 10 guy, he's a little bigger, maybe a little bit of a better shooter, but some of the same issue with, actually, Wheeler's mechanics weren't nearly as bad as Elleby's, but his touch from the outside, some of the things Wheeler can do from an athletic standpoint, I just don't know that there's really that much upside with Elleby. Again, there's some, because I do think he could plug and play, play a few possessions defensively. Again, NBA experience does matter on some level. So I think there's some hope there, but far more likely he's going to end up in the G League this season for the Wolves on that Exhibit 10 deal. He'll get a bonus to stick with the Iowa Wolves. And I think that's where we'll see him. But the shooting percentages are the biggest problem. And then there's really isn't any other skill that really pops out besides the size and the ability to grab steals. So, playing 58 games for a pretty bad Portland team last year doesn't really move the needle all that much. What I want to do next is I want to talk about the end of the roster, and well, I don't think Elleby will be on the roster on opening night. And if he is, something went probably quite wrong, or perhaps he had a ridiculous training camp and exhibition season. But I want to talk about the end of the roster, the potential, movement that could happen there, and what the Wolves are doing with the last few guys they've added to two-way and training camp type deals. So we're going to do that here next. With the addition of CJ Elleby to the Timberwolves roster, they now have several of these kind of long, rangy athlete type guys who are really best cast as wings that could play some small ball for at the end of the roster. It's really kind of an interesting collection of players down at the end of the roster on only partially guaranteed deals. I mentioned I don't think Elleby's really going to make the team, but I mean, he'll have a shot to compete because there are four guys with partially guaranteed deals. Now, of the four, only a couple I think the Wolves would actually consider waiving in training camp in favor of a guy like CJ Elleby. But Austin Rivers, his deal doesn't become guaranteed fully until January 10th. Same with Jalen Noel. I think both of those guys are very safe on the roster. I don't think there's really any chance that Rivers or Noel would be waived in training camp. They both have minimal guarantees, but I don't think they're going anywhere. Even smaller guarantees, Nate Knight and, well, actually, Naz Reid's is a little bit bigger. But in Naz Reid's case, I think it's more likely he would be traded. If say the Wolves fell in love with CJ Elleby or, if Nate Knight just completely dominated in camp, I still think there's a chance Naz Reid gets traded for a second round pick or two at some point in camp or early in the season. I think that's a possibility. And then Nate Knight would be the other one that's only got a partial guarantee. So what that basically means is the Wolves could waive any of those four guys, Rivers, Noel, Knight, or Reid, and only be on the hook for a few $100,000. Their deals all become fully guaranteed in January. In Rivers' case, it's a vet minimum deal, so it's like $3 million, 2.9 million, I think, total. For the other three, it's like 1.8, 1.9 million, depending on the player. So basically, if the Wolves decided it was important to free a roster spot for whatever reason, like say it's because CJ Elleby or Philip Wheeler has a ridiculous camp, unlikely it would have to be absolutely nuts for them to do that. Or say they decide they want to sign DeMarcus Cousins or something like that, or maybe a 2-for-1 trade. They could waive one of those guys and only be on the hook for several $100,000. I don't think it's likely. I think that the roster will be what it looks like now, which is anybody with any form of guaranteed money. Those 15 guys, I think, will be your 15 guys on opening night. I think the most likely possibility, if anything was to happen, I still think it's a Naz Reid trade for a second round pick or two. And then you'd have the opportunity to say, okay, do we convert? I didn't even mention Eric Pascal or the other two-way, AJ Lawson. Do you convert one of those guys to a full deal and offer a two-way to an Elleby or to a Philip Wheeler? Or do we give the spot to an Elleby or a Wheeler? Do we sign a DeMarcus Cousins? Do we sign another vet that's out there that potentially could add something to this roster, add some, leadership experience, et cetera, if Naz Reid were to be traded? Because again, if they trade him, I think it's likely for a pick or two, second rounders, and it's not for another NBA player. So that's where your flexibility comes in. You've got those four guys with partially guaranteed deals. You've got an NBA veteran and Eric Pascal on a two-way contract. You've got a higher upside guy who is, I think, a plug and play, not super high upside, but in terms of all these players I'm talking about, in AJ Lawson. There's a ton of really good talent. There's length. There's NBA experience at the end of the roster. It's not what the Wolves typically have, right? And they have the ability to play around with that a bit. That you could waive one of the guys with the partially guaranteed contract. You could trade somebody like a Naz Reid or maybe a Nate Knight or something like that for a couple of second round picks or 1 second round pick, more likely. You could convert an Eric Pascal two-way into a full deal if you do something like that, and you could put an Elleby or Wheeler, somebody who's younger with some upside, onto a two-way deal. There's a lot the Wolves could do, and the common thread here is every single player I've talked about is basically a 3 or a 4. That's how the Wolves see them, right? Nate Knight can play the 5, yes. Eric Pascal can play the small ball 5, but really they're 4s. Naz Reid, Naz Reid, I guess, the exception, but he can also play the 4. He's not strictly a 5. I think he has the ability to play the 4 based on his size, his ability to play in the perimeter. And Noel's not going anywhere, so I'm not seriously talking about him as somebody that's going anywhere. Same with Austin Rivers. And then you look at Elleby, you look at AJ Lawson, you look at Eric Pascal. These are all guys who are 3s or 4s with some versatility, some positional flexibility in terms of who they can defend. And there they are at the end of the Timberwolves roster, with the Wolves having the option to trade them, to waive them, to convert them into two ways or to a full roster deal. There's just a lot of flexibility beyond those guaranteed deals. And we've talked at length about the depth the Timberwolves have. And this is all a luxury, right? I mean, your top like 12 or 13, 14 guys are pretty set in stone with your starting lineup of D'Lo, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Karl-Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, your second line of Jordan McLaughlin, Jalen Well, Taurean Prince, Kyle Anderson, and then whether it's Nate Knight or Naz Reid, that's 10 guys. And you've still got Bryn Forbes and Austin Rivers. That's 12 guys. Well, actually 13 if you're counting both centers. And then you've got the rookies and Josh Mine and Wendell Moore, who are not going to be in the rotation from day one, but they're also not going to be traded, right? They're not going to be They're under contract. They're going to be with the team this season. And that's your 15 right there. There's not a whole lot of movement unless you trade a Naz Reid or a Nate Knight. Your two-way guys, both very impressive. AJ CJ. Talked a lot about CJ Elleby earlier. AJ Lawson, a really exciting player in a two-way. Again, go back and listen to last Monday's show if you want to learn more about him, but he's somebody who I think could play right now in a rotation in the NBA and be effective. And then you got somebody who literally has, for 3 seasons, has a ton of NBA experience at Eric Paschall, a really good player to have on a two-way, probably one of the better, certainly more experienced two-way players in the entire league. So the end of the roster has been completely reshaped. The depth is really there. And I said 12 months ago, I talked a ton about how great the Wolves' depth was. Jalen Noel, Taurean Prince were essentially battling for the 10th spot in the rotation. Jordan McLaughlin was out of the rotation. And what the Wolves did is they traded some of the guys in the middle to get higher end talent in Rudy Gobert, most obviously. They made a big rotation addition in Kyle Anderson. And they did some work on the fringes, and they trusted Jalen Noel. They're trusting, he's the most obvious one, but also Jordan McLaughlin to be players that, from what they saw from them last year, they're now worthy of a rotation spot on a playoff caliber team. And then they backfilled those spots with guys that are veterans with playoff experience. And Austin Rivers, an NBA champion, and Bryn Forbes, Kyle Anderson, who's got extensive playoff experience. And this team is now deep, really 1 through 15, for the first time, I think, ever. And I said this the other day, it's probably a whole podcast. We could compare the 2000, and I'm not at all saying this is a Western Conference Finals team. Wait for those predictions a few weeks. But comparing, like, you want to compare 1 through 12, we'll call it, a 2004 when the Wolves went to the conference finals, to 2022. I mean, I don't know. I feel like, whoever the 10-day guys they were signing midseason, like Anthony Goldwire and some of those guys that they were signing, Robert Pack, I think, guys like that. I feel like Bryn Forbes, Austin Rivers, Jordan McLaughlin are on par or better than those players in terms of the Wolves' depth. And so the other thing I should mention is if this movement doesn't happen in the training camp, during training camp, if they're not trading Naz Reid, if they're not waiving Nate Knight or whoever during training camp and adding something, this can happen at any point before that guarantee date on January 10th. And then after that is when you can start signing 10 days. So you're looking at players who could be, they could reach a settlement during the season, a buyout. They're on the buyout market. We've seen that kind of cool a bit the last couple of years, but that's a possibility. There's also 2-for-1 trades. There's trading guys whose contracts are about to become guaranteed. There's plenty of things that could happen once the season starts that are all out there as possibilities. The Wolves have built themselves flexibility with 4 partially guaranteed deals, 2 two-ways, and now a couple of Exhibit 10 guys. And they're all, in some way, shape, or form, mostly interchangeable in terms of what they do. There aren't any 5s. There aren't any 1s. These are mostly 3s and 4s with a couple of 2s mixed in who aren't going anywhere in Rivers and Noel. But interchangeable parts where the Wolves can decide they like the upside or they like the current NBA-ready skill right now in somebody else. They like the length in one player, or they like the rebounding ability in the other. They've bought themselves a bit of time here with the end of the roster and a lot of different directions they could go as the next few months wear on. So good job by Tim Connolly in the front office. CJ Elleby is an intriguing addition, even if I think he's the least intriguing of all the players we just talked about. But another addition for the training camp roster here as we inch ever closer to training camp and exhibition basketball here in the next few weeks. All right. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again on Friday. Again, 3 shows a week right now, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Be sure you're following and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, a big thank you if you do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. And you can find us on YouTube. You can also find the show anywhere you listen, any audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey. You can follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. That's all we have for you today. Thank you again for listening to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. A reminder, you can make your second listen the Locked On NBA show. You can get up to date on the latest news and rumors in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. Again, Locked On NBA, your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.